and thank you for joining us. My name is Larry Worthen, and I'm the Executive Director of the Christian Medical Dental Society of Canada. We're here today because on March 6th, the Council of the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario passed a policy called Professional Obligations and Human Rights. We support much of what is in the policy. After all, none of our members wish to discriminate against any patient. Our members have dedicated their lives to the care and well-being of their patients. However, many physicians have conscious objections to participating in certain procedures or prescribing pharmaceuticals. These objections are well-reasoned and considered, firmly held, and based on objective standards like the Christian scriptures, catechisms, or the traditional Hippocratic Oath. These standards are held by many people over time. Conscious objections come from a variety of sources. Religions like Islam, Jewish religion, Christian religion, or members of other religions, and even followers of secular creeds like humanism may all have objections to performing or participating in certain procedures. Now, traditionally, this conscience concern has been respected in medicine. This policy unfortunately changes all of that. This policy forces doctors to refer for procedures that go against the physician's conscience. And in addition, doctors must actually do procedures in an emergency where it is necessary to prevent imminent harm. We are concerned about the broad interpretation of the word emergency that might completely erode conscience protection. Now, some may ask, why is referral a problem? The doctor who has conscientious objections considers a referral to mean that they are facilitating a procedure that is contrary to their conscience. They perceive themselves to be aiding and abetting, or an accomplice to an action that they know is morally wrong. We acknowledge this in Canadian society, insofar as we're not allowed to extradite offenders to other countries where they might face capital punishment. So strong is our concern about capital punishment and the moral wrongness of it. Yet, nevertheless, we are asking physicians in this policy to, in a sense, refer a patient to another physician for a procedure that they know will result in either in the case of euthanasia, the death of a patient, or in the case of abortion, the death of a human being. Furthermore, these changes are completely unnecessary. Most doctors inform all of their patients of their conscientious objections when they enter the practice. And most doctors are willing to discuss all procedures with their patients. The doctor, and in fact, in Ontario, for instance, referral for a termination of pregnancy is not actually required because patients can self-refer. What typically happens in these cases is that once a female patient goes to see her doctor, discovers that she is pregnant with an unwanted pregnancy, the doctor will have a thorough discussion with her of her options, and then a doctor who has conscience concerns about referring for abortion will simply advise the patient that she can self-refer for this procedure. In many cases, in most cases, the patient-physician relationship is not ruptured at all. The patient will come back and see the same doctor again as their family physician. It must be remembered that even though our members are concerned about these procedures, they do not condemn people because they choose them, and they're still willing to be conscientious caring physicians for those individuals, even though they may disagree on these issues. Now, I just want to introduce to you today the other members who are here for a press conference. To my left is Dr. Diane Hack from Orillia, Ontario. Diane is the president of CMDS Canada, and I'm going to ask Diane for her reflections on the impact of this policy on physicians.
Good morning. I'm a family physician. I also, as president of the Christian Medical and Dental Society, represent 1,600 kind, caring physicians who provide exemplary care to their patients. I believe strongly that the policy, professional obligations, and human rights will harm, most importantly, patients, but also the physicians who serve them. This policy may force physicians who do not feel they can refer or perform procedures that go against their conscience to leave the practice of medicine. Being forced to practice medicine in a way that conflicts with one's conscience creates an inner tension that is morally wounding and can lead to physician burnout. It is also contrary to the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which guarantees everyone the right to be free from state interference or compulsion with regard to their freedom of conscience and religion. The CPSO conducted a survey prior to adopting this policy, asking the public whether a physician should be allowed to refuse to provide a patient with a treatment or procedure because it conflicts with the physician's religious or moral beliefs. More than 32,000 people responded, with 77% in favor of physicians being allowed to continue in the practice, to practice in accordance with their consciences. The CPSO also received approximately 16,000 submissions, the overwhelming majority of which argued for physicians' conscience rights. It puzzles and concerns me then that the college could have passed a policy with clauses that take away this freedom.
Thank you, Diane. We're going to turn now to Dr. Michelle Corvemaker, who is a family physician in Woodstock, Ontario. Michelle?
Good morning. My name is Dr. Michelle Corvemaker. In Woodstock, Ontario, I work in the emergency department and in palliative care. In Wingham, Ontario, I also work in the emergency department, and I fill in for family physicians who are on leave, which includes seeing patients in their office and in the hospital. During the last 10 years of my practice, I've had the freedom to practice according to my conscience. According to the Code of Medical Ethics of the Canadian Medical Association, I'm required to advise patients when I don't perform certain procedures or when I don't prescribe certain medications for moral or ethical reasons. For example, when patients request abortion, we have a discussion about the various options that a woman has when she does not want to be pregnant. I advise that I cannot refer for abortion, given this would go against my moral and ethical beliefs. However, I do inform the patients that they are able to self-refer for abortion in Ontario, such that there is no obstruction to the patient's choice or access. The College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario's new policy would require me to engage in and facilitate an abortion, which would be contrary to my conscience and religious beliefs. The recent Supreme Court of Canada ruling, which opens the door to physician-assisted death, is particularly concerning in light of this policy. As a palliative care physician, I could be faced with requests for physician-assisted death, and this new policy would require me to facilitate and be involved in such a procedure. My conscience and religious beliefs preclude me from engaging in procedures to which I have a moral, ethical, and religious objection. I and all physicians in Ontario have the right to practice medicine according to our consciences and free from state compulsion. That is why we have launched this challenge.
Thank you, Michelle. The fourth member of our panel is Albertos Polisagopoulos, who is an Ottawa lawyer and who is the one who has filed the application on our behalf. Albertos is here to answer any specific legal questions. I just wanted to make mention of the fact that we have actual copies of the court application over on the table there that you can access if you like, which will give you the specifics of our argument with the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. At this point, we'd like to open it for questions, and we would be happy to respond to any questions that you might have about this situation.
You mentioned euthanasia and abortion. Are there any other specific examples you can give us? I think medications were mentioned also, and I'm not clear on what that would entail.
Yes, for some of our members, now, one of the things I want to mention is that there are a spectrum of conscience concerns, and our organization does not have a particular position on any of these other than to support overall conscience concerns. Some of our members would have concerns about prescribing contraception in terms of birth control. Some might have some concerns about various reproductive technologies. Some may have concerns about abortion, and euthanasia, I think, is top of mind for very many at this point.
Reproductive technologies like in vitro fertilization.
In vitro fertilization, that sort of thing, yes.
Was this, some people might say that because doctors are funded by the government, by the state, that if, they should therefore provide services that are available or that are offered by the government or the state. How would you answer that?
Well, our response to that is that the state cannot impose its values on individuals who provide services. Most physicians in Ontario would be private people who are who receive a fee for service, but they are not government employees. But nevertheless, even if government employees would have this kind of objection based on conscience, that also should be respected. The state should be impartial and should not impose one set of values over another. By requiring that people extinguish their conscience, that's the state imposing its values on something that's protected under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
But I mean, in small, in small communities, this could, where, we know that there's a doctor shortage in certain areas. This might, pose a problem for a patient who perhaps, if the only doctor available for a woman who has an unwanted pregnancy, who wants to get an abortion, isn't this going to present difficulties, for a woman to get the care she needs under those circumstances?
We don't believe so, because women can access termination of pregnancy through self-referral. There are other ways as well, innovative ways that can be used that can ensure access of service while at the same time protecting physicians' conscience rights.
I'll just add to that, if I may. It's important to note that this is a new policy. This policy was passed March 6th, and prior to March 6th, a physician was legally entitled to say, I simply don't do this or that. So essentially, the college here is trying to solve a problem that didn't exist. Because your concern is, well, this may pose a problem, and the reality is it hasn't posed a problem in the past.
So, okay, so, I mean, I guess you can't speak for the CPSO, but is this in regards, did they change the policy with regards to euthanasia, or what's, why do you see this sudden change in policy?
Well, this began in 2008 when the Ontario Human Rights Commission approached CPSO and asked them to, basically told them that from their perspective, the Human Rights Code applied to physician behavior, and they wanted to incorporate the issue of human rights into the regulation through the CPSO. Essentially, we have no problem because with the Human Rights Code, because we don't want to, nor have we ever discriminated against patients. But this goes beyond the issue of discrimination and actually challenges our rights and freedoms under the Charter. Essentially, what happened was in 2008, there was a discussion at that point, and CPSO considered taking away conscience rights with reference to referral, but decided to defer that, and that this policy has come up basically as the regular review of their policy, and they decided at this point that they would challenge the freedom of conscience with reference to referrals.
And you spoke about emergency situations, and you talked about, you sort of touched briefly on the definition of emergency.
Correct.
I mean, because there are situations where some of these procedures might be, life-saving or whatever. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you meant by emergency situations, like when, how you perceive that problem, or?
Well, the problem is it's very difficult to define. In actual fact, if physical life and limb are at stake, our members will jump in and will provide the services to save someone's life. There's no question about that. there really is no conscience conflict on those types of issues. But the concern is that when we start talking about an emergency situation, the question is, who defines what's an emergency? Some of our palliative care physicians, for instance, are concerned about a scenario after the legalization of euthanasia, where a patient who has requested euthanasia, but not at that point, might find themselves in an agitated state and then might decide that that is the time that they want to be euthanized. There could be problems in that circumstance. So a number of our palliative care physicians are actually so worried about it that they're considering getting out of palliative care. So the concern is really why they had to put that clause in there when, again, solving a problem that's not there.
Larry, at what point did you seek to meet with Dr. Gable?
When we sent our original response to the consultation, at that point, we asked to meet with them. That would have been last August.
August.
Yeah.
So that would have been before the online consultation began?
Would have been. I believe it was the covering letter that went in with our consultation. We asked to meet with the CPSO. Okay, and I've made repeated requests to meet with them. I really believe that there is a win-win scenario here where we can ensure access and also protect physician conscience rights. I firmly believe there's no reason for us to be setting out on this application to court, and we're being driven to it by the refusal of the CPSO to actually meet with the groups who are directly involved. No other group is more directly at their careers and their livelihood is more at stake than our group. And it would seem to me that a dialogue would be appropriate to try to resolve these issues rather than us being forced to go with this application. We're raising this money with donor dollars. And if I had my druthers, I would give this money to a project that we have in South Sudan, helping people with trying to educate medical workers to be able to work in that impoverished country. Instead, we're having to spend the same resources on this, in my opinion, needless application.
$150,000?
Well, it all depends. If they decide to, $150,000 is probably accurate. Yeah.
So are donor dollars from where these are people make donations to the society?
The people make donations to the Christian Medical Dental Society. And those donations then are used for us to be able to preserve our conscience rights through this application.
Just a very small point. The court filing says you have 1,700 members. The news release says 1,600. I'm just wondering which one is closer to accurate.
The actual number is 1,687. I think it's just a rounding error. I also want to mention that we also are joined by the Canadian Association of Catholic Physician Societies. It's a smaller group of approximately 150 members across Canada who are also concerned in this, but they've joined in this application with us as partners.
So you said, so your resolution, what would be your way to resolve this issue, to go back to the way it was before, or do you have, what would you like CPSO to, how would you like CPSO to resolve this?
Well, I would really welcome an opportunity to sit down with Dr. Gable to see if there's some way to come up with a resolution of this that would protect our conscience rights while at the same time ensure access. I'm concerned that they're using a very blunt instrument to try to correct a very specific problem. If there are physicians out there that are in some way discriminating against patients, or being rude to patients, or not being sensitive to the plight of patients, then we're certainly not in favor of that, and we would certainly agree with proposals that would deal with that specific situation. But this concept of coming up with a referral actually makes access more difficult for the patient than improves it. If a patient has to wait for a physician to make a formal referral when in fact they can self-refer, that just doesn't make sense. So I would really love to know exactly what their thinking was of why to force a doctor to make a referral when the patient themselves can self-refer for the same thing. You're still getting the visit with the doctor. I worked it through in my mind. It just, I can't figure out the logical reason for this.
Is there the possibility that other groups may come in on this application?
We've had some discussion with other groups from various Christian denominations and also religions outside of Christianity. And although I can't make any announcements today, there is certainly a possibility that others will join as interveners.
The Ontario College of Physicians and Surgeons is an independent body. The Charter of Rights applies to governments. In what sense can you hold the College of Physicians and Surgeons to the Charter of Rights?
Albertus, would you take that one?
The College of Physicians and Surgeons is a creation of statute. It's a statutory body, and it performs a quasi-governmental function. So by regulating the practice of medicine, the college is acting pursuant to delegated authority, delegated to it by the minister. So it is subject to the charter in its performance of a government action.
The college certainly thinks that it can defend its position in court. More lawyers than doctors spoke at the meeting. Have you thought through what their argument will be?
We've certainly considered where they're coming from. Obviously, we disagree with what we expect them to say. The position that we're taking is not a novel position. The idea that the charter applies to a quasi-governmental body performing a government function is not new. Just last month, we had a decision involving a law society, which is very close parallel to a college. And there was no questions as to whether or not the charter applied to a law society and its regulation of the law profession. So we have no concerns in terms of the applicability of the charter here.
The college argues, and the Human Rights Commission argued, no rights are absolute. When rights come in conflict, there has to be a balance, and not everybody wins. This is a case where they say we have balanced the right of a woman to access abortion against the conscience rights of individual doctors. We're not asking doctors to actually perform any of these actions. We're only asking that you refer. If you refer me to another doctor for my back pain, you're not implicated in whatever range of treatment the back specialist may give me. Why isn't this compromise good enough?
Well, I think first of all, from the very beginning, the foundation of that statement is completely flawed. This is not a conflict between doctors and patients. You're talking about doctors that have given their lives to serve these patients. There's absolutely no conflict. There's no reason why you can't protect physician conscience rights and provide access. You know who agrees with that? The Canadian Medical Association, the Ontario Medical Association, the American Medical Association. And in addition to that, there is absolutely no jurisdiction in the world that requires physicians to refer for euthanasia. So why is it that they're now saying that this is essential and that somehow patients' access to services is going to be affected? This is completely, in our view, a completely false dichotomy. There is no conflict here. And in a tolerant country like Canada, we should be able to find a solution that is win-win for both sides. And we do that through dialogue, not through these types of, the way the CPSO has handled this. This is not a way to promote dialogue. This is a way to promote confrontation and conflict. The other thing that I wanted to say was that the issue of the issue of somehow a compromise, that completely boggles my mind, because the Supreme Court of Canada in Carter said that you could not force a doctor to participate in either abortion or euthanasia. So where's the compromise? All they've done is they've just eroded conscience rights for physicians. There's no compromise there. This big government bureaucracy is basically trampling on the rights of individual physicians who are simply trying to do the best for their patients. Our members got into medicine because they were convinced that they could help people, that they could help heal them, that they could serve them and meet their needs. They did not get into the practice of medicine participating in procedures that they know are going to harm human life. That's not healing. It's not healing to refer somebody for euthanasia. It's not healing to refer someone for abortion. That's actually hurting people. And so our members are saying, you know, if the government wants to say yes to this, and if people want to go ahead and do this, fine. We will serve the patients to the best of our abilities. We will talk to the patients about their options. We will help the patient afterwards when they deal with the repercussions of their choices. But do not ask us to be implicated in the actual participation in this act. And for us, referral is a facilitation, it's a participation. Any other group in society would be accommodated when it comes to something like this. And we just wonder what it is that's driving the CPSO to try to essentially discriminate against physicians in our organization so that they cannot practice medicine. Conscience is an attribute of a Christian physician. There's no other way around it. Other protected groups in society have attributes as well. We're simply saying that there should be no discrimination against people because of their beliefs and because of their faith. That's protected under the Human Rights Code. The other thing that I think is quite disturbing is the fact that the CPSO kind of held a public opinion poll about whether or not our civil rights should be protected. What other group would tolerate that? You know, can we imagine a public opinion poll on whether people of color should be physicians, or whether women should be physicians, or whether people who have same-sex attraction, the members of the LGBT community, whether they should be doctors? Of course not. That would be seen as being horribly discriminatory. And yet, this was the nature of the CPSO consultation. And it has led to many hurt feelings on behalf of our members, and tremendous controversy and divisiveness, where our suggestion is it was not necessary in the beginning. Dialogue could have resolved the problem. I'm going to ask the members of the panel if they did you have any final things you wanted to?
It's 10:30.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.